I'll fight you. That's what you wanted to hear, isn't it? You want me to fight you? Let me, Mr. Policeman. You want to get big and get some stars? Yes, sir, no, sir. I'll bow this to Allah, to Allah.
Why is it wrong for dictators and terrorists to kill innocent civilians, and right or excusable for the United States to do exactly the same?
Well, the United States doesn't do it, and if we did it, it would be as reprehensible as what the terrorists do.
The United States doesn't kill innocent civilians?
No, the United States does not target civilians.
Those of us on the outside who look at September the 11th, where 3,000 people died in that tragedy, but then look at the thousands who have died since, wonder about double standards here. Would you address that?
I think that the numbers that you're talking about are questionable. So let's leave aside your numbers.
Why are they questionable?
I mean, I don't accept your assertion that we've killed thousands of innocent people. But let me get to the.
There's a lot of studies and an examination of facts on the ground that suggest indeed thousands. I mean, in Iraq at the moment, there are studies that are talking about 10,000, but I don't want to get into numbers, but certainly thousands seems a fair figure.
I don't know that that's true, and I don't accept the assertion.
If you ask an American student how many people died in Vietnam, he'll tell you 58,000, because they've dismissed the 2, 3, maybe 4 million Vietnamese who were killed by the United States and its allies in that war. So this is an ongoing issue. Mr. Powell, Colin Powell, General Colin Powell, I think, was quoted as having said he's not interested in civilian casualties in Afghanistan. It's not his concern. And that's the attitude, I think, with Iraq. Whether it's 5,000 or 10,000, it's really not an issue.
Well, I think Americans, like most people, are mostly concerned about their own countrymen. I don't know how many Iraqi civilians were killed, but I can assure you that the number is the absolute minimal that it's possible in modern warfare. One of the stunning things about the quick coalition victory was how little damage was done to Iraqi infrastructure and how low Iraqi casualties were. And I think
that's quite high if it's 10,000 civilians.
Well, I think it's quite low if you look at the size of the military operation that was undertaken.
It's practically an inevitability in war that there are going to be innocent people who get hurt, no matter how much care a professional military, a properly behaved military, puts into avoiding damage to non-combatants and to civilian infrastructure.
Mr. Fife, that sounds fine, sitting here in Washington. But in Iraq and in Afghanistan, which is my most recent experience, that's not how it looks at all.
May I interrupt for a moment? I apologize, sir. Would you stop tape, please, for one moment? Thank you very much. Let me know when you stop tape.
Excuse me?
I'm sorry, I'm doing this purposefully, sir. Have we stopped tape?
This is very serious.
I was not under the impression, sir, that
Mr. Fife's minder, an Army colonel, suddenly stopped the interview as I had pursued the question of civilian deaths.
And I tried hard to be proud of my service, but all I could feel was shame. And racism could no longer mask the reality of the occupation. These were people, these are human beings. I've since been plagued by guilt anytime I see an elderly man, like the one who couldn't walk, who we rolled onto a stretcher and told the Iraqi police to take him away. I feel guilt anytime I see a mother with her children, like the one who cried hysterically and screamed that we are worse than Saddam as we forced her from her home. I feel guilt anytime I see a young girl, like the one I grabbed by the arm and dragged into the street. We were told we were fighting terrorists. The real terrorist was me, and the real terrorism is this occupation. Racism within the military has long been an important tool to justify the destruction and occupation of another country. It has long been used to justify the killing, subjugation, and torture of another people. Racism is a vital weapon employed by this government. It is a more important weapon than a rifle, a tank, a bomber, or a battleship. It is more destructive than an artillery shell, or a bunker buster, or a Tomahawk missile. While those weapons are created and owned by this government, they are harmless without people willing to use them. Those who send us to war do not have to pull a trigger or lob a mortar round. They do not have to fight the war, they merely have to sell the war. They need a public who is willing to send their soldiers into harm's way. They need soldiers who are willing to kill and be killed without question. They can spend millions on a single bomb, but that bomb only becomes a weapon when the ranks in the military are willing to follow orders to use it. They can send every last soldier anywhere on earth, but there will only be a war if soldiers are willing to fight. And the ruling class, the billionaires who profit from human suffering, care only about expanding their wealth, controlling the world economy. Understand that their power lies only in their ability to convince us that war, oppression, and exploitation is in our interest. They understand that their wealth is dependent on their ability to convince the working class to die to control the market of another country. And convincing us to kill and die is based on their ability to make us think that we are somehow superior. Soldiers, sailors, airmen have nothing to gain from this occupation. The vast majority of people living in the U.S. have nothing to gain from this occupation. In fact, not only do we have nothing to gain, but we suffer more because of it. We lose limbs, endure trauma, and give our lives. Our families have to watch flag-draped coffins lowered into the earth. Millions in this country without health care, jobs, or access to education must watch this government squander over $450 million a day on this occupation. Poor and working people in this country are sent to kill poor and working people in another country to make the rich richer. And without racism, soldiers would realize that they have more in common with the Iraqi people than they do with the billionaires who send us to war. I threw families onto the street in Iraq, only to come home and find families thrown onto the street in this country, in this tragic and unnecessary foreclosure crisis. We need to wake up and realize that our real enemies are not in some distant land. They're not people whose names we don't know and cultures we don't understand. The enemy is people we know very well and people we can identify. The enemy is a system that wages war when it's profitable. The enemy is the CEOs who lay us off from our jobs when it's profitable. It's the insurance companies who deny us health care when it's profitable. It's the banks who take away our homes when it's profitable. Our enemy is not 5,000 miles away. They are right here at home. If we organize and fight with our sisters and brothers, we can stop this war, we can stop this government, and we can create a better world.
Allah. And I do not accept you or your authority. I do not accept Tony Blair or Bush. I accept Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I do not fear you people.